guys, welcome back to The Bargain Collector. Come on in, kick your feet up, and hit the like. So, on one of my last trips to the library, I picked up a couple of films. The first was File Staff, aka Chimes at Midnight, and the other film was Elvis Presley's King Creole. Now, I've already done my review for Chimes at Midnight. Now it's time for this guy. So on the technical side, as I said before, this was a Blu-ray that I picked up from the library for $1. And it did come with the poster on the inside. It's a great Paramount Presents release, but it was a 4K scan as well. And it has Dolby Audio. I think it's a 5.1 track. So the film was presented super sharp. You got a lot of depth in the shadows. There was a lot of dynamic range, despite the fact of not having any HDR. So I felt visually it was a great presentation. Audio wise, it was a great presentation. The music was thumping. I loved every single song. I do know that as I watched the special features, the film critic who was speaking said that this film, the year that it was being made, was while it was still in its infancy, you did have color film stock available. So the director chose to shoot black and white rather than color, which is an interesting choice with a film like this, because I can only imagine how much color would have helped the film. Not that it was a bad film visually. It was great. It was phenomenal visually, but color would have certainly helped, especially if color was available at that time. But that all being said, visually, it was top notch. I really do want to see what 4K and HDR does for the film, but as it stands, the Blu-ray was solid. And maybe with 4K, they're going to go the route of trying to do Dolby Atmos for sound, but I don't think it really needs it. My sound system played this movie, and like I said before, it was great separation in the channels, and they all mixed well, and the music was thumping. I don't know what the improvements would be on the audio side. Now, that being said, let's hop into my thoughts on the film itself. I had to go look up who the director was. In the middle of the movie, I was like, I gotta pick, because it's not slowing down. Like it's going on and just getting better as the movie goes. I gotta figure out who this director is. I look it up. And it's the same director of Casablanca. When I read the critics' reviews of this film, and they said this was hands down Elvis Presley's best performance and his best film and his best soundtrack, all of it all in one film, it made a lot of sense. Okay? It made a lot of sense. It was the first time for many critics. I'm not a big Elvis Presley fan. I'm sorry guys. I didn't grow up at that time. Okay. And there was no way for me to have that appreciation. Growing up, I never saw any of his films. So don't hate on me too much. But what every critic did say was that this was the first time they ever saw Elvis Presley relaxed in a film, and that he didn't look like he was trying hard. It just looked like he was the character. And I have to say, without having seen the other films, yeah, he looked like a natural. More importantly, the guy looked like a freaking superstar. He looked like what I thought Elvis Presley should be, a guy who you can't take your eyes off of him in a film. One of the funniest notes that I made about this film was that it looked to me like everybody in the film wanted to be with Elvis Presley. We're talking every woman. It didn't matter who she was. Didn't matter what her age was. She wanted to be with Elvis. It looked like guys wanted to be with Elvis. It looked like the bad guys in the movies wanted to date him. It looked like the woman who was playing his sister wanted to date him. it was he does have a certain magnetism to him, and I don't think it's something that he's trying to do. I just think that's who the guy was, and people were drawn to him, and it definitely works for this film. The movie starts with a shot on Bourbon Street of all of these vendors selling their wares, right? They're belting out what they have, and their voices are just velvet. And there begins this song, this duet uh between Elvis Presley and this young lady about crawfish. And as soon as that song started, I knew I was in for something special. I just knew it. This movie, I've watched a lot of musicals, and there's no reason for anybody to burst out into songs. This one, every song felt natural for where it occurred and how it occurred. It felt natural song where songs were placed. It all felt natural. And it all felt good. There was times when I was just sitting on my couch listening to this, and I'm just rocking out. I'm just like, man, it's so catchy. Every song is catchy. Every song has a crazy rhythm to it. Every song has so much energy and an enthusiasm. There's even a young lady in the movie that has a song about bananas. Banana lady. I don't know her name. I'll try to tag it somewhere here while I'm talking. But there is a lady who's singing a song about bananas, and she snatches bananas off her dress and throws them in the audience at the end. Even her song had me from the moment just charisma. That's probably what I want to say. Every song is great, and then the performers have so much charisma that it just really pulls you in. And it was expertly integrated into the film. So on to what I think about this film. As you know, with this channel, it's not about growing my library of films. I've already done that. I had way too many movies that I would never get to, and I trucked them all off and sold them in bulk. Okay. I got rid of them and rebuilt my collection with only films that I find entertaining, have shelf appeal, and are rewatchable as hell. So where does King Creole fit? Well, I think as far as shelf appeal, I mean, it's cool. I mean, while it just kind of sort of looks like just a slipcover, it's not. It's actually really cool. It opens up to the little poster. It's nice. It's attractive. I can wipe off the $1 thing there if I chose to add it to the collection. I think overall, it's a great looking piece as far as shelf appeal. Did I find it entertaining? Yes, entertaining as hell. I had a good time watching it. When the movie was over, I was very surprised that it was over. I was like, already? And I realized, yeah, it's been 2 hours. And he said, you're literally bopping and singing to every song I don't think there's a single song that's not a banger in this movie. And that's not an exaggeration. Not an exaggeration. Not a single song that's not a banger. The acting was great. I only have one thing, and trust me, I'm not the guy you would think I am when I say this, but it felt a little weird watching a movie with women who have no agency whatsoever. I know that was a thing at a point in time in history, but it was really weird to watch a movie where every woman needed to be rescued from their life. That was a little weird. Unfortunately, that's my only knock on this movie is yeah, the women didn't have any agency. And like I said, I'm not that dude. I'm not the dude that goes around woke. I'm not that guy. Okay. It was a little weird. But that's my only knock. So entertaining as hell. But Is it rewatchable? That's a tough question. This is actually a tough question. I don't know if it's rewatchable because I want to watch. I guess I'm answering my own question. I want to watch it again to see if it's rewatchable. I had such a good time watching it, such an incredible time watching it. I had such an incredible time watching it. I just don't know. Yeah. It's rewatchable. It's rewatchable. I feel crazy even sitting here wondering if it's rewatchable. It's rewatchable. It's rewatchable as hell, actually. Um, I thoroughly enjoy it. If this is his best film, I'm glad that I own his best film. I am. Only way that one leaves my collection is if I somehow come into possession of the 4K. So yeah, Elvis's King Creole, I think it's going in my collection. So that was not a bad library find. Elvis Presley's King Creole on Blu-ray, 4K remastered for $1, going into the collection. All right. Well, I can't wait to see what I find next. Until next time, keep finding good movies at great prices.